Hey there, everyone. Welcome to our discussion today about ages and stages understanding childhood development. You may have tuned in a little bit earlier and saw that my microphone was off. I actually went through the entire presentation. Oh my goodness. I went through the entire presentation and my whole microphone is off the whole time. And I got to the final slide and then I saw that the microphone had been off. So this is take two. We're going to try a second time to make it through ages and stages, understanding childhood development. But before we jump into that, let's talk a little bit about some other things that are going on over with Mister Stu TV. Make sure to follow Mister Stu TV on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. There are a lot of different resources and fun things for children as well as the adults that children trust over on our YouTube page. You'll find different episodes about various emotions, and you will find tips, tricks, and discussions about being a parent. We make tough emotions child's play over there. So check out youtube.com/@MrStuTV. Also, be aware that in 2 weeks, I will be back with another Facebook Live. It will be on June 11th at 2 p.m. And this one is about giving praise to children. We'll talk about the two types of praise and why both types are important for your child or your children, and how to give each to your child or children. But for today, we are talking about ages and stages, understanding childhood development. It's an exciting topic to understand different things. As children grow, it can be so amazing to see all of the different changes that they undergo as they're even just from birth to 1 year, 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years, 6 to 8 years, 9 to 12 years. And we've got all those different periods broken down into little chunks. For each one, we're going to talk about some of the typical developmental milestones that we'll see children reach during that age frame. And then we'll also talk about ways that you can support that development in your child as they are growing and developing. As we talk, there might be times where you think, oh, well, my child didn't do that at that age, or my child, oh, this makes me nervous. What if my child isn't reaching that? It's all okay. These are good guidelines, but children may be a little bit ahead, they may be a little bit behind, and all that's okay. Just think of these as ballpark guidelines. Now, if your child is very far behind on some of these developmental milestones, that's where professional help can take place. Things like speech therapy, occupational therapy, mental health therapy can all help support a child if they are falling behind significantly in these developmental milestones. But take a deep breath and remember that you've got this, and your child is beautiful and amazing just the way they are, even if they don't quite meet all of these things right on time. It's okay. And you can be there to support them and learn as they grow in their own ways. Let's talk about phase one. Phase one, I'm calling baby steps. And in this phase, we can say from tiny tots to little explorers, every step counts. During this phase, from birth to age 1, from birth to about 1 year old, children will start to do some amazing things. One is they'll start to smile in reaction to things. Maybe they'll see your face and you can see them that they start to smile and open up. It's their way of interacting with this world before they have words for interacting with this world. Maybe something looks interesting, fun, colorful, and you'll see them smile. That's their first understandings of how this world works. They may also start to coo. So this, that noise, it's called cooing, and they'll start to make that noise. And again, that's because they're hearing everyone else interact through words and through language. They're taking a shot at it. They're doing their best, and they'll start to make those little noises. Also, from birth to age 1, it's typical to see children start to roll over. That means they're starting to understand the sensations both outside and inside their bodies. And as they learn control over those things, they might start to rock back and forth like a turtle on its shell. And then all of a sudden, they'll make it all the way over and they'll turn and they'll be able to roll over onto their bellies. This is also the time where children will start to sit up. It doesn't mean that they'll be able to sit up for long, extended periods of time, and it doesn't mean that they'll be able to do that without your help at all, but it does mean that they're kind of able to support themselves without something always just propping them up. They'll be able to sit up on their own. This is also where they're starting to crawl because they've been able to roll over, and then you'll see the scoot where they start to pull their arms and kind of slither a little bit and wiggle. Then they might start to push up a little bit and be able to get a couple crawls, and they might collapse because it's too heavy, and then they push back up and then they can crawl a little bit more. This is where that starts to happen. Also, between birth and age 1 is where we expect to hear babies, children, start to say their first words. These first words typically are more like sounds than words. It's things like ma, ma, or da, da, things like that, where we know it's a word, but is it really a word or is it just a mimicking sound? Either way, children are starting to formulate language during this time. Also, between birth and age 1 is when children can start to walk. Maybe they'll pull themselves up, and it doesn't mean that they're able to walk all the way across a room, but they're able to pull themselves up and take a couple steps and then maybe collapse. This is from birth to age 1. There are some ways that you can support development during this time. Number 1 is to provide a safe environment. Now, I'm not going to mention that with every phase, but that is the most important thing at every phase. If a child doesn't feel safe, they can't focus on anything else. If a child doesn't feel safe, they can't focus on their schoolwork. If a child doesn't feel safe, they can't focus on developing language because their brain is always preoccupied with that safety. It's important to provide a safe environment for children during these formative years and beyond so that they can focus on their development rather than trying to stay safe. You can also engage in tummy time, where your child actually lays with you. It helps them to develop more of that sensory perception about where my body ends and your body begins. It also helps them to stay regulated by hearing your heartbeat and feeling your breathing. There are all sorts of great things that happen when you engage in tummy time with your child. It's also important during this time to talk, read, and sing with your baby. Even if you're not a good singer, even if you're not a great reader, even if you're not a great talker, make sure that you are talking, reading, and singing with your baby. There are times where Stark, my dog, and I will be hanging out, and I'll just be talking with him back and forth. Now, I know that most of the words I'm saying Stark doesn't understand, and that is probably true of your baby, your child as well. But it's developing different things in them that they can start to read body languages and nuances and what different inflections mean. That because they got loud, they must be feeling a bigger way. Because they got quiet, they must be feeling a different kind of way. It's not so much about the words as it is about the inflection. And then the words are important because that's where your child can start to mimic. And offering age-appropriate toys. A lot of toys at this phase are very big and clunky and just kind of allow children to start to move things around and start to figure out how toys even work of interacting with different pieces. It's important to provide some of those things so that children are able to interact with their world. They don't just feel like they're sitting as a bystander, but they can actually interact. If you'll do that, especially providing the safe environment for your child, you'll be setting them up for success in this first phase of development. Up next are what I call the terrific twos. I've heard them called the terrible twos, the horrific, or the terrible twos, the terrorizing twos. That was the other one. I call them terrific twos. During this phase between age 1 and 2, or ages 1 and 2, children will start to increase their motor skills. There's two different types of motor skills. One is called gross motor skills. It doesn't mean that they're disgusting. It means they're gross, that they're bigger. And gross motor skills are things like walking, being able to grab something, or something big, not like pinch something, but grab something big. That would be a gross motor skill, and especially during this time are where those gross motor skills are developing. There are other skills called fine motor skills. That's like being able to hold a pencil, being able to color inside the lines, different things like that. We'll talk about that during another phase. But during this time, they're starting to increase those gross motor skills. They're also starting to understand independence. That is where some of that terrible twos or terrorizing twos will start to take place, because they are understanding I am separate from you, and what I want isn't always what you want, but I want what I want. They'll start to say things like no, mine, why, over and over and over, because they're understanding this idea of independence. Up until this point, they thought you all were connected. You were always going to do the same things. You were always going to be on their page. You were always going to do whatever they wanted to do. And now they're starting to understand that, wait, we are separate people. That's where some of the difficulties come in, because that can be very stressful for a child to understand, hey, really, I'm separate. That's a very scary idea to a child. So increasing that independence increases anxiety and stress. And on top of that, they're understanding that what you want and what I want are not always the same thing. So that increases anxiety and stress. That's why you start to see more tantrums, meltdowns, things like that during this age. This is also where they're developing more language. They're starting to put together simple sentences, and they're starting to be able to interact back and forth. They can take turns in a conversation because their language skills are developing. It's likely that their language skills aren't making total sense just yet, but you can kind of work together and understand each other through the language development. And finally, this is when social skills start to happen. Because they're understanding I'm separate from you, you are separate from me, they also have to learn how to interact with people who are separate from themselves. So social skills start to develop during this time. What you can do to encourage the developmental growth of your child during this phase of their development is to encourage pretend play. Now, pretend play is where a child has likely seen something or seen an example of something, and they are reenacting it or recreating it in their own way. They're able to pretend to go to the store, to pretend to cook, to pretend to be in a story that you read. They can pretend those things. It's not quite imagination just yet. It doesn't mean your child doesn't have an imagination, but more imagination happens a little bit later. During this phase, children are still pretty much just mimicking and parroting quite a bit, whether it be through behavior or whether it be through speech. But encourage that pretending. Practice naming different objects. That allows them to be independent by being able to ask for different things. It also develops more of their language skills, and it can develop some of their social skills. If they can have a shared name for different things, then children can interact with one another easier as well. You can establish routines during this time. That doesn't mean that every moment of every day needs to be scheduled, but it does mean, hey, we wake up around this time. We go to sleep around this time. We eat around these times. These are the normal patterns of the day, the week, the month, different things like that, where children can start to understand that life is fairly predictable, and I'm safe, I'm secure, and I'm loved. If you'll set that up by establishing routines, then it helps children feel safe even as their independence grows. That yes, you are separate than I am, but we can do some things together still. And provide opportunities for social interaction. I have a German Shepherd. He's actually taking a nap right over there, and he is a big, big dog. As he has grown, and even as he was a puppy, it was important for me to take him to the dog park so that he could learn how to interact with different dogs. Dogs interact with each other different than people interact with each other, and different than people interact with dogs. If I wanted him to be ready to interact with other dogs, he needed to go to the dog park. The same is true with children. If you never give them an opportunity to be social, they won't be able to develop social skills, and then don't be surprised when their social interactions aren't so great. So provide some opportunities, whether it be through planning a play date, going to a playground, going to the zoo or the science center, whatever it might be, but allow them to interact with different children to build some of those skills. From babbling to chattering, let's embrace the terrific twos. Up next is one of my favorites. This one's called the Preschool Powerhouse. This is from ages 3 to 5, and they are fun. These are the kids say the darndest thing type of kids, because during this phase, their language skills are starting to be enhanced. They are starting to learn kind of how words work a little bit, but for the most part, they are still repeating a lot of full phrases, full sentences, and they might not understand the full meaning of it. This is also when children might even start to develop their own jokes. I'm not sure if you've ever had a child tell you a joke, but typically it goes something like, "Why did the chicken cross the road?" And you say, "I don't know why." And they'll say, "Because the frog had a fly in its mouth." Ha 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 ha. And it will be very strange and not make any sense at all to anyone but the child. And maybe their group of friends all start to laugh too. That's because they're really starting to understand language, but it's still building. They still don't know what different words mean. They just kind of know in general, okay, I say this if I'm feeling this way, I say this if I'm feeling that way, and I can start to put these different phrases together. But kids will say the darndest things during this time. They might say things that you know the full meaning of, and you are just completely panicked when they say it out in public. It's okay. Their language skills are just developing, and they're learning how words work. Imaginative play starts to happen much more at this phase. We talked about the pretend play. Let's talk about imaginative play. Imaginative play is different from pretend play because pretend play is pretending to be something that they know. Imaginative play is where they can really start to dream up their own characters, dream up their own stories, and really show their full imagination, not just their mimicry skills. Also, they'll show improved coordination. This is where children can start to really color. They can stay much more inside the lines. They can hold a crayon without it having to be one of the fat jumbo crayons, different things like that. And also, they will start to develop numeracy and literacy skills. So they might be able to do very simple math or be able to count. They might be able to start to say letters. They may be able to spell their name later on in this phase. Different things like that start to pop up where they're starting to put together just a few things that all make sense to them. Ways that you can build development during this stage are to engage in storytelling. That helps build your child's imagination. It also helps them develop social skills by having a safe way to try out different social situations. If you are telling a story and there's a social situation that pops up, you can ask your child, "Oh, what would you do if they made fun of you?" Or "What would you do if they were sitting alone at lunch?" Different things like that. And let children start to fill in the gaps on their own, be imaginative, and start to develop some of those skills. And you can introduce some simple educational games. That includes things like puzzles or the games where you have to match shapes into different, there might be a peg and you have to put the right shape through the peg. Different matching games. Memory can be a good game at this age. The card game War, where you're just turning over and saying, "My number's higher than your number." Those games are great for children at this age because it builds some of those cognitive skills, it builds some of those educational skills, and it allows them to have social interaction, it allows them to build resilience, all sorts of other things. And finally, encourage physical activity. We talked a little bit about the gross motor skill development. At this phase of their life, children should be able to start running much more, jumping, different things like that. Let them be more physical. Let them jump on the playground. Let them run up and down the field. Let them do different things like that. And as they do those things, they're starting to develop those motor skills more and more and more and more. That's especially important during this phase of their development. During the preschool powerhouse, you can unleash your child's inner powerhouse with curiosity and creativity. So allow them to be curious, allow them to be creative, allow them to be playful and physical and all sorts of other things. And that's really what can build them up during this time. Next are a great fun group called the Elementary Escapades. This is from ages 6 to 8. During this phase of children's development, they'll start to refine more of those motor skills. We talked about the gross motor skills, the running, jumping, being able to pick up large objects. During this phase, especially when they're in school, they'll start to get more of those fine motor skills, being able to hold a pencil, hold a crayon, hold a pen, whatever it might be, being able to take one sheet of paper rather than a stack of papers, being able to put Legos together. All those things really start to develop between ages 6 and 8 as those motor skills are becoming more refined. They also develop problem-solving abilities. Before, children see the world as much more of a if this, then this. If this happens, then this thing happens. If this happens, then this thing happens. And the world is fairly automatic and regimented. Well, during elementary school, children understand that it's not that easy, that it's not just always if this, then this. It's sometimes if this, then you got a problem you got to work out and overcome, then you can get to the other side. And this is where children start to be able to work through that problem that's in the middle. They're probably not great at it just yet, but let them take a try and help them develop those problem-solving skills. They start to increase their attention span. That does not mean that children can sit for 7 hours quietly and do school for the whole time without any disruptions whatsoever. What it does mean is they might be able to finish three problems on a worksheet before they get distracted, rather than getting distracted halfway through the first problem on the worksheet. Their attention span will start to increase, and if nurtured, that attention span will increase even more and more and more each day even. But during this time, that attention span starts to grow as children understand the different things that require different amounts of time and the different things that they want to spend different amounts of times on. And finally, children will start to expand their social skills during this time. Because it's likely that they're interacting with more children, they'll understand and learn how to interact with more and different types of children. It's an important part of this phase of development. What you can do to support the development during this phase is to support academic learning. As your child is learning things at school, ask them questions about it. What's something you learned today that was exciting? What's something new you learned today? Oh, wow, tell me more about that. That sounds really cool. You all did what? Oh, so cool. And if you will boost that, then it shows children that school can be fun, that learning doesn't have to be boring and dull, but it can be exciting and full of life. You can encourage extracurricular activities. That doesn't mean to sign your child up for everything that is offered, but it does mean that if your child shows some interest in something, or if you want your child to show some interest in something, that you allow them to be signed up for that activity. You sign them up for it and let them try out different things that can build more of those motor skills, both gross and fine motor skills. It can help them learn how to solve different problems, whether it be through the activity itself, or it can also expand their social skills as they learn to negotiate different problems and solve different problems as part of the extracurricular activity. This is also time to foster friendships. During this phase, children will tell you that everyone is their best friend and that everyone is their friend. And then after they've told you that someone is their friend, there will come a day where that person is no longer their friend. I am not friends with so-and-so anymore. During those times, you can ask questions. Oh, what happened? Oh, that does sound tough. And then you can have more negotiation conversations where, oh, well, just because Olivia didn't want to hang out with you at recess doesn't mean that Olivia hates you. It just means Olivia wanted to do something else during recess. You can start to help them understand how friendship works. And finally, this is a time to teach responsibility, whether it be taking care of their toys on their own, whether it be making a peanut butter sandwich on their own, different things, but they can start to understand responsibility. So let them have some responsibilities. They can help feed pets. They can help clean up after pets. They can clean up their own messes. They can do different things on their own. Allow them to do those things, and as you do that, you'll build their responsibility, you'll build their problem-solving skills, you'll build their fine motor skills. All of those things are wrapped up in responsibility. You can embark on a journey of growth and discovery during the elementary escapades. The final phase that we're going to talk about today goes up through age 12. So this is ages 9 through 12, and it's called the tween transformation. This is that time between about grades 4 through 6 where children really start to understand some independence about themselves. It's also a time where critical thinking happens. Now, before this age, there's a part of the brain right behind the forehead, and it's called the prefrontal cortex. That prefrontal cortex is responsible for critical thinking, meaning being able to take a lot of different concepts, pulling them all together to solve one problem. Up until these ages, and really up until about age 12, children don't have that capability. They can solve math problems. They can answer questions about something that they read. They might be able to do an experiment and answer questions about it. But as far as being able to go outside the scope of what just happened or what they're looking at right now, it's very difficult. That's why we don't teach algebra to children younger than these ages, because algebra is a very critical thinking concept. There are letters, there are numbers, some of them are missing. You got to figure out what to do. You got to pull a lot of different things together, all together to solve one problem. This is the phase of life where they start to develop that skill. This is also the time where emotional regulation starts to become a self-skill, self-regulation. So up until this age, children are kind of thrown about like a boat on the water by their emotions. A big one comes and it splashes up on the boat, and you might see a tantrum or a meltdown. Different things like that happen. That doesn't mean that children can't self-regulate at all, but probably up until this age, you're having to do much more of what's called co-regulation, where you're actually sitting with them, and by you remaining calm and talking them through the situation, they are learning how to handle that situation on their own. So this self-regulation starts to happen with their emotions during this time, because a lot of those critical thinking skills are also starting to develop. This is also a time for self-awareness and developing a sense of identity. So that self-awareness is, who am I and who am I in relation to this world? And that self-identity is, who do I want to be? You'll see children during this time start to maybe even not be as nice towards people that aren't as similar to they are. Earlier, everybody was their friend. Now they're much closer with people who are into the things that they are into, and they might even start to say that different people are more or less cool than they are as they develop their sense of personal awareness and personal identity. Some ways that you can help children develop during this phase. Ways that you can do that are to provide guidance and support. That doesn't mean just rush in and solve problems for kids. Remember that during this phase is when they are learning how to be critical thinkers. So if you just rush in and take care of everything for them, They can't continue to develop that skill, but you can provide guidance and support. You can offer your 2 cents. You can offer instructions, and then allow the child to figure out kind of how to navigate that support, how to navigate that guidance, how to navigate those instructions, and that can develop their critical thinking. But it is going to be important that you provide some support and that you also help to guide your child during this time. During this phase, you can also start to engage in much more open communication. As children ask questions, you can give them fuller answers to things because they're really starting to understand it, and it will help build their critical thinking if you will give them full answers. Why can't we go to the park today? And maybe your answer is because it's raining, it's wet outside, and then we'd get really muddy. Well, if you just say, I don't want to go to the park today, and that's it, well, then the child just thinks it's all based on what you do and don't want to do, which is partially true. But if you explain, oh, well, it's raining outside, it rained last night even, it rained last night, so that means that the ground is still muddy, and if we go out on the muddy ground, then you could get really, really dirty. I think it's better if we play inside today. Well, now they've logged that in their prefrontal cortex, and the next time they think about going outside after it's rained, they may say something like, is the ground still wet? And you'll see those pieces start to come together where they can start to make those choices on their own. This is also a time for you to nurture interests and talents. We talked about trying out extracurricular activities in the last phase. During this phase, it's likely that children have kind of found some things that they enjoy doing. Nurture those things. Even if they seem strange to you, even if you don't fully understand them, do your best to start to learn some about them. Let them teach you about those things and nurture that so that they can become an independent person who feels proud of themselves. During this phase, you can watch your child blossom as they navigate the twists and turns of the tween transformation. And that concludes our overall very general discussion about the ages and stages understanding childhood development. We talked about baby steps from birth to age 1. We talked about the terrific 2s from age 1 to 2. We talked about the preschool powerhouse from ages 3 to 5. We talked about the elementary escapades from ages 6 to 8. And we talked about the tween transformation from ages 9 to 12. There was a lot of information there. There were a lot of different milestones. There were a lot of different ways that you can support those things. And maybe right now you are just completely overwhelmed thinking, oh my goodness, I didn't read to them when they were a baby. I didn't sing when they were a baby, and now they're going to be broken forever. That is not how it goes. Take a deep breath and remember that the number one predictor for positive outcomes for children is a safe, secure, and loving attachment to at least one trusted adult. If they have that, everything else kind of finds a way to work itself out, whether it be through professional help or whether it be just through some more time. If you will provide an environment that is safe, secure, and loving, that is the number one thing. And then you can look into all these other things, and if your child is struggling in different ways, you can reach out for help, whether it be through a relative, a friend, or a professional. But understand that your job as a parent, before everything else, is to provide that safe, secure, and loving environment. And know that if you're doing that more than anything else is setting your child up for success, more than any developmental milestone, more than any of the other things that I talked about. Providing a safe, secure, and loving environment is number one. Make sure that if you have any questions about these ages and stages or childhood development, please post them in the comments to this video. You can post them on the Mister Stu social media pages, and I or one of the team will be happy to get back with you, and maybe we can talk about this some more in the future. Make sure you are following Mister Stu TV on all social media channels. We are on Facebook, we are on Instagram, we are on TikTok, we are on Twitter, we are on all sorts of things. Make sure that you are following there. Also, make sure to follow Mister Stu TV on YouTube. That's youtube.com/@MrStuTV. There We make tough emotions child's play. And you will find resources for yourself and your children at our YouTube page. And finally, remember that in 2 weeks, I will be right back here for another Facebook Live about giving praise to children. That will be on June 11th at 2 p.m. Don't miss it. Well, it's been great talking with you today, and until I get to see you again, make sure you spread the word and share the love. Bye-bye.